rain slammed violently against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the penthouse, making the entire room feel colder than death itself. On a massive king-sized bed, Kang Min-jae, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul and ruthless CEO of the trillion-won Kang Group, lay pale, barely breathing. His usually sharp dark eyes were dull. His lips had turned almost blue. He was dying. Not from an enemy bullet. Not from a gang war. Not from betrayal in business. But from poison. And standing beside his bed in a silk champagne dress was the woman who had done it. His fiancée. Elegant. Beautiful. Cruel. Sign it. Min-jae, she whispered sweetly, sliding a stack of papers onto his chest. You're already dying anyway. His breathing became uneven. He tried to lift his arm. Failed. His vision blurred. The documents in front of him were his will. Every asset. Every company share. Every penthouse. Every hidden offshore account. Everything he built with blood would be transferred to Han Soare. A small smile curved her lips. You should be grateful, she said softly. At least I'm staying by your side until the end. Min-jae's jaw tightened. He wanted to strangle her, but his body no longer obeyed him. He could only stare. Powerless. Humiliated. Betrayed. Outside the bedroom door, one person had seen everything. A young African maid stood frozen, one hand covering her mouth. Amina, 24. Quiet. Invisible. Usually ignored by everyone in the mansion. But tonight, she had accidentally witnessed the murder of the most powerful man in the house. And if she did nothing, by sunrise, Kang Min-jae would be dead. But what happens next changes everything. Because instead of running away like anyone else would, Amina made the most dangerous decision of her life. She stepped into the room and interrupted death itself. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to @Official_Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Amina had never imagined her life would lead her here. Not to Seoul. Not to a penthouse worth more than everything her family had owned combined. And definitely not to the bedroom of a dying mafia boss. Just 3 years earlier, her life had been painfully ordinary. She grew up in a struggling household, the eldest daughter carrying responsibilities too heavy for her age. Her father died when she was 16. Her mother became chronically ill soon after. University became a luxury she couldn't afford. Dreams were packed away like old clothes. Survival came first. Amina worked multiple jobs before an overseas domestic agency offered her a contract in South Korea. The pay was better. Accommodation included. Food covered. It sounded like salvation. She accepted immediately. What she didn't know was that her new employer wasn't an ordinary rich family. It was the Kang household, a dynasty feared across both legal and illegal worlds. The Kang Group publicly operated as one of Korea's most powerful conglomerates. Hotels, shipping, luxury fashion, tech investments. But beneath the polished corporate empire was another reality. A darker one. Money laundering, underground casinos, political influence, black market deals. And at the center of it all was Kang Min-jae, the heir, the king, the monster everyone feared. People whispered about him. Cold, emotionless, dangerous. A man who never smiled. A man whose enemies disappeared. A man who allegedly once destroyed an entire rival organization after they touched someone under his protection. Amina first met him on her second day working at the penthouse. She was carrying a tray of tea into his private study when one of the older maids intentionally bumped into her shoulder. The tray slipped. Porcelain shattered. Hot tea splashed across imported Italian marble. Silence. The room went still. Amina froze. Her heart stopped. Slowly, she looked up. Kang Min-jae sat behind an enormous desk in a black tailored suit. His face was impossibly handsome. Sharp jawline. Dark eyes. Perfect skin. A dangerous kind of beauty. The kind that looked carved rather than born. But his expression was unreadable. Amina bowed instantly. I'm sorry, sir. Her voice shook. No response. The other staff held their breath. Everyone expected her to be fired. Or worse. Min-jae stood. His footsteps echoed across the room. Amina lowered her eyes, bracing herself. Instead, he stopped beside her. Looked down at the broken porcelain. Then at the maid who had bumped her. Did she spill it? He asked calmly. Or did you cause it? The room became even quieter. The older maid went pale. Sir, I. Answer carefully. His tone wasn't loud. That made it more terrifying. The woman began trembling. Amina looked up, stunned. He knew. He had noticed. Even from across the room. The maid fell to her knees apologizing. Min Jae didn't spare her another glance. Remove her from this floor. 2 security guards entered instantly. The woman was dragged away crying. Amina stood there speechless. Confused. Why had he defended her? He turned toward her. His gaze was cold but focused. Clean it. And just like that, he walked away. No comfort. No kindness. No explanation. But for some reason, Amina couldn't stop thinking about it. That moment should have terrified her. Instead, it planted the first dangerous seed of curiosity. Because beneath Kang Min Jae's cruelty, there had been fairness. A strange one. A brutal one. But fairness. And in a mansion built on lies, power, and manipulation. That alone was rare. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Amina learned the rhythms of the penthouse. Min Jae left before sunrise. Returned late. Always surrounded by bodyguards. Always serious. Always exhausted. Sometimes injured. Though no one dared ask questions. There was one person in the household who treated Amina kindly. Madame Kang. Min Jae's grandmother. An elegant elderly woman with sharp intelligence hidden behind warmth. She liked Amina immediately. Perhaps because Amina never flattered her. Never begged. Never pretended. She simply did her work honestly. One evening, Madame Kang invited Amina to help arrange flowers in her private lounge. You're observant, the old woman said suddenly. Amina blinked. Pardon, you notice more than people think. Amina smiled nervously. Madame Kang studied her carefully. My grandson trusts no one. There was a pause. But he hasn't asked for your replacement. Amina frowned slightly. That was apparently significant. In this household, staff turnover was notoriously high. People rarely lasted long. Min Jae was impossible to please. Yet somehow, months had passed. And she remained. What she didn't know was that Min Jae had already begun noticing far more than her housekeeping skills. He noticed she skipped meals to send extra money home. He noticed she secretly left medicine outside Madame Kang's room when the older woman forgot. He noticed she once stood between a frightened junior maid and an abusive supervisor. He noticed everything. And that was dangerous. Because Kang Min Jae did not allow himself attachments. Especially not to someone like her. A poor maid. An outsider. A complication. But human hearts rarely obey logic. And his was beginning to betray him. Meanwhile, another pair of eyes had noticed it too. Soare, the fiancée. She was stunning. Polished. Socialite royalty. Perfect on paper. A future chairwoman. But beneath the designer dresses and elegant smiles was venom. The first time she truly noticed Amina was during a dinner party. Amina was serving wine when Soare intentionally extended her foot. Amina stumbled. Red wine spilled across Sora's white designer gown. Gasps filled the room. Perfect. Exactly as planned. You incompetent idiot. Soare snapped. Amina bowed repeatedly. I'm sorry, miss. Before she could finish, Soare raised her hand to slap her. But the slap never landed. A large hand caught Sora's wrist midair. Everyone froze. Kang Min Jae. His expression was lethal. Enough. Just one word. But it sent chills through the room. Soare forced a laugh. She ruined my dress. Buy another. His voice was flat. Then he released her wrist. Looked at Amina briefly. Leave. Amina hurried away, heart pounding violently. Inside the kitchen, her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped another tray. Why had he protected her again? Twice now. And in front of everyone. This was no longer subtle. This was dangerous. Because Soare noticed too. And jealous women with power were far more terrifying than enemies with guns. That night, Amina received a warning. One of the senior staff approached her quietly. You should be careful. Why? The woman hesitated. Women who attract Mr. Kang's attention never end well. A chill ran down Amina's spine. She wanted to dismiss it. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. And she was standing too close to the center of a storm. Meanwhile, danger was already approaching. Far from the penthouse, inside a dark underground lounge, a rival Mafia leader stared at surveillance photos spread across a table. One photo stood out. Amina, the maid. He smirked. So that's his weakness. And the moment a powerful man develops a weakness, his enemies start sharpening knives. Back at the penthouse, Amina stood alone on the balcony under city lights, unaware her life had already changed forever. She thought her biggest problem was surviving a toxic household. She had no idea she was about to become the most important woman in a mafia war, and the woman who would one day save Kang Min-jae from losing everything. But first, she would have to survive Han So-ra, and Han So-ra had already begun planning her next move. The next morning, the entire penthouse felt unnaturally quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a battlefield feels quiet after soldiers have loaded their weapons, but before anyone fires. Amina sensed it immediately. Something was wrong. Even the household staff, usually chatty in private corners, moved carefully as if stepping around invisible landmines. And the reason was simple. Han So-ra had not forgotten what happened the previous night. Women like her never did. Amina was polishing crystal glasses in the formal dining room when the head housekeeper approached. Her face was stiff. "Miss Han wants to see you." Amina's stomach dropped. Not a request. A summons. She placed the cloth down slowly and followed the older woman upstairs. Each step toward So-ra's private lounge felt heavier. The door opened. Han So-ra sat elegantly on a cream velvet sofa, legs crossed, sipping tea as if she hadn't nearly slapped someone in public hours ago. She looked beautiful and terrifying. Her smile was small and calculated. "Amina," she said sweetly. That tone was somehow worse than shouting. Amina bowed slightly. "You called for me, miss?" "Yes." So-ra set her cup down. "I've been hearing a lot about you." Amina stayed silent. A dangerous game was beginning, and silence was safer than words. So-ra stood and walked toward her slowly. Her heels clicked against marble like a countdown. "You're from Africa, right?" "Yes, miss." "That must be difficult." Her voice was soft with fake sympathy. "Coming all the way here. Working in someone else's home. Cleaning up after people richer than you could ever imagine." Amina kept her expression neutral. She had heard worse. Much worse. But So-ra leaned closer. "So tell me something honestly." Her smile vanished. "What exactly are you trying to do with my fiancé?" The air left Amina's lungs. "Nothing, miss." A lie would have been foolish. But the truth was complicated. Because she genuinely wasn't trying to do anything. That was the problem. So-ra circled her like a predator. "Then perhaps you should remember your place." There it was. Not subtle anymore. A direct warning. Amina lowered her gaze. "I understand." But what she didn't know was that Han So-ra was already beyond warnings. She had moved into strategy. And strategy was always crueler. That afternoon, Amina was assigned to clean Min-jae's private office. This was unusual. His office was usually off limits to nearly everyone. Only his assistant and security team entered freely. Amina hesitated before stepping inside. The room smelled faintly of leather, cedarwood, and expensive cologne. Everything was immaculate. Organized. Sharp. Like the man himself. She began dusting shelves carefully, avoiding his desk. But while cleaning near a cabinet, she noticed something odd. A framed photograph partially hidden behind legal files. Curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up. A younger Kang Min-jae stood beside an older man. His father, presumably. Neither smiled. But what caught her attention wasn't the lack of warmth. It was Min-jae's eyes. Even younger, they looked burdened. Heavy. As if childhood had skipped him entirely. "You shouldn't touch things that don't belong to you." Amina gasped. The frame nearly slipped from her fingers. She turned. Min-jae stood by the doorway. He had returned earlier than expected. Still wearing a dark suit. Tie loosened. Expression unreadable. Amina bowed quickly. "I'm sorry, sir." He walked toward her. Calm. Measured. Dangerously calm. Amina placed the photo back. "I was cleaning." "I can see that." His voice was low. Not angry. Just observant. Her pulse quickened. Being alone with him always felt strange. Like standing too close to something powerful enough to destroy you. But instead of reprimanding her, he looked at the photograph. "My father." Amina blinked. He was explaining? Unexpected. She nodded quietly. Min-jae stared at the frame for a moment. "He died when I was 20. I'm sorry." The words left her before she could stop them. A small silence followed. He looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time, something shifted. Not employer and maid. Not boss and staff. Just two people carrying private grief. "He was murdered," Min-jae said. Amina's eyes widened slightly. He turned away. Clean the rest. Conversation over. Yet the atmosphere had changed again. A small crack in his armor. A dangerous one. And Amina had seen it. That evening, Seoul was blanketed in snow. A rare, soft snowfall turned the city into something almost romantic. Inside the penthouse, a power outage suddenly plunged half the building into darkness. Staff panicked. Backup systems activated slowly. Amina carried candles through dim hallways, lighting rooms one by one. As she entered the library, she found Min Jae seated alone by the fireplace. No laptop, no documents, no bodyguards, just silence and firelight. He looked less like a feared mafia boss and more like a tired man trying to remember how to exist. You can leave the candle. Amina placed it down carefully, but before she could go, wait. She froze, turned. He gestured toward the opposite chair. Sit. Her eyes widened. Surely she misheard. Sir, I dislike repeating myself. So she sat, stiffly, nervously, across from one of the most dangerous men in Korea. An absurd situation. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, warm firelight softened the edges of the room. For a while, neither spoke. Then Min Jae asked unexpectedly, "Why did you come to Korea?" Amina hesitated. This was personal. Too personal. But his gaze remained steady. So she answered honestly, "My family needed money." A simple sentence. But heavy. He nodded once, as if he understood more than she said. "My mother is sick." A pause. "My younger siblings are still in school." She gave a faint smile. "So I work." No self-pity. Just fact. Min Jae studied her. Most people around him were ambitious, manipulative, or transactional. But Amina was painfully straightforward. No performance. No agenda. And that made her far more dangerous to him than any enemy. Because authenticity was rare. Addictive. You don't complain. Amina almost laughed softly. Would it help? A brief silence. Then something almost unbelievable happened. The corner of Min Jae's lips lifted. Not a full smile. Barely there. But real. Amina stared. Stunned. She had just witnessed something most of Seoul probably never had. Kong Min Jae smiling. And somehow, that moment felt more intimate than physical touch. What she didn't know was that someone had seen everything. From the slightly open library door. Han So-are. Her nails dug into her palm, so hard they nearly broke skin. Her face darkened. Enough. This had gone too far. A maid. A foreign maid. Threatening her position. Unacceptable. And so Han So-are made a decision. If Amina would not leave willingly, she would be destroyed. The next morning, chaos erupted. A diamond necklace worth hundreds of millions of won had gone missing. Han So-ra's necklace. Staff were lined up in the main hall. Tension crackled. Security was present. Household employees whispered nervously. Then So-are spoke. "My necklace was in my jewelry case last night." She folded her arms. This morning, it was gone. The implication was obvious. The head housekeeper looked horrified. A search will be conducted. Amina felt a chill. This was bad. Very bad. One by one, staff belongings were inspected. Bags. Lockers. Personal drawers. Then security opened Amina's locker. And there it was. The necklace. Perfectly placed. Like a snake coiled in plain sight. Gasps filled the room. Amina stared in disbelief. "No." Her voice cracked. "That's not mine." So-are sighed dramatically. "How disappointing." Amina turned pale. "I didn't take it." No one believed her. Why would they? Evidence was literally sitting inside her locker. Security moved closer. The head housekeeper looked devastated. "Amina." Han So-are crossed her arms triumphantly. This is what happens when desperate people forget boundaries. Humiliation burned through Amina. Not because of the accusation, but because it was working. She was losing. Just like that. Finished. And then, enough. The voice sliced through the room. Everyone froze. Kong Min Jae had arrived. Dressed in black. Expression glacial. He surveyed the scene. Then looked at the necklace. Then at Amina. Her eyes were wide, hurt, but stubbornly holding back tears. He knew instantly. She didn't do it. Not because of evidence, but because he knew her. And that realization hit him harder than expected. Han So-are smiled tightly. "She stole from me." Min Jae stepped closer to the locker. Picked up the necklace. Examined it. Then said calmly, "Check the security footage." So-ra's face changed for half a second. Too quick for most people. But not for him. "There's no need," she replied quickly. "The evidence is obvious." Min Jae looked at her. Long. Cold. Deadly. "Did I ask for your opinion?" The room went silent. Even so, RA stiffened. Security pulled up footage. Minutes later, the truth appeared. A house staff member secretly placing the necklace into Amina's locker. Under instructions. From Han So-ra's assistant. Caught. Clear. Indisputable. A collective gasp spread. Amina exhaled shakily. Relief nearly made her knees weak. Han So-ra's expression hardened. For the first time, her mask cracked publicly. Min Jae turned toward her. His voice was dangerously quiet. Leave. She blinked. What? Now. Humiliation flashed across her face. In front of staff. In front of Amina. She had lost. For now. But women like Han So-ra didn't forgive humiliation. They escalated. And as she stormed out, one thought burned in her mind. If Amina was becoming a real threat, then maybe simple sabotage wasn't enough anymore. Maybe Amina needed to disappear entirely. Meanwhile, Amina stood shaken, still trying to process what just happened. Everyone began dispersing. But before she could leave, Min Jae approached. You should be more careful. She stared at him. Careful. His gaze darkened. You are standing in the middle of something you don't understand. A warning. Not criticism. A warning. Amina swallowed. What exactly am I standing in? For a moment, he almost answered. Almost. But instead, he simply said, danger. Then walked away, leaving her with a racing heart and far too many questions. But what she didn't know was that his warning had already come too late. Because outside the penthouse, in a black sedan parked across the street, a rival Mafia operative watched her through a camera lens and reported into his phone. We found the girl. A pause. Then, proceed. A cold voice answered. Yes. By the end of that week, Amina could feel it. Not see it. Not prove it. But feel it. The sensation was subtle at first, like an itch at the back of her mind. Someone was watching her. Every time she left the penthouse to buy groceries for Madame Kong or pick up dry cleaning, she felt eyes on her. A figure lingering too long near the convenience store. A black car parked across the street twice in one day. Footsteps slowing when hers slowed. Her instincts screamed danger. But Amina kept telling herself she was imagining things. She had already been through enough stress. Han So-ra's humiliation. The necklace incident. Min Jae's increasingly confusing behavior. Her mind was exhausted. Still, something inside her refused to settle. And unfortunately, her instincts were right. Inside a dim underground office, rival Mafia boss Jang Dae-hyun leaned back in his chair, studying fresh surveillance photos. His lips curved slowly. One photo showed Amina leaving the penthouse with grocery bags. Another showed Min Jae briefly placing his hand on her shoulder while moving her aside from an aggressive driver near the entrance. Tiny gesture, but enough. Dae-hyun tapped the photo. There. His subordinate nodded. Kong Min Jae is attached. Not love. Not yet. But attention. Interest. Concern. For a man like Min Jae, that was enough to weaponize. Dae-hyun smiled darkly. Prepare the car. Meanwhile, inside the penthouse, Amina was doing her best to ignore her increasingly complicated emotions. Which was difficult. Very difficult. Especially because Kong Min Jae had somehow become impossible to avoid. Not physically. Emotionally. He was suddenly everywhere. In her thoughts. In her awareness. In the silence between ordinary moments. Like now. She stood in the kitchen slicing fruit when Min Jae entered unexpectedly. No security. No assistant. Just him. Still dressed in his usual dark clothing. Expensive watch glinting faintly under warm kitchen lighting. He glanced at what she was preparing. For my grandmother? Amina nodded. She hasn't eaten much today. He hummed quietly. Not quite approval. But close enough. A silence settled. A strange, comfortable one. Then he noticed a small bandage on her finger. What happened? Amina blinked. He noticed that? Oh, I cut myself earlier. Min Jae stepped closer. Too close. Before she could react, he gently took her hand. Amina froze. Her entire body went still. His fingers were warm. Large. Careful. He examined the bandage with surprising focus. It was wrapped badly. Her heart began hammering violently. This was inappropriate. Dangerously intimate. Yet neither moved. Neither spoke. The air thickened. Min Jae opened a nearby drawer, pulled out a first aid kit, and began re-wrapping her finger himself. A Mafia boss. A feared CEO. Re-bandaging a maid's finger in silence. Absurd. Completely absurd. And somehow unbearably intimate. Amina couldn't breathe properly. His face was close enough for her to notice details she normally avoided staring at. The faint scar near his eyebrow, perfect skin, long lashes, sharp nose, and exhaustion. Always exhaustion. Done. He released her hand, but not before his thumb brushed lightly across her knuckles. Accidental. Probably. Yet it sent a dangerous warmth through her chest. This kitchen has knives, he said flatly. Amina stared, then almost smiled. Noted. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're amused? No, sir. A lie. A terrible one. For the first time, his expression softened. Barely, but enough. And just like that, he walked away, leaving Amina gripping the counter like her legs had forgotten their purpose. This was bad. Very bad. Because feelings were beginning. And feelings in places like this were expensive. Sometimes fatal. But what happens next changes everything. 2 days later, Madame Kong requested fresh flowers from a luxury floral boutique across town. Amina volunteered to go. She welcomed the break. Fresh air. Distance. A moment to think. The city was unusually bright that afternoon. Traffic buzzed. People moved normally. A completely ordinary day. Until it wasn't. Amina exited the boutique carrying flowers wrapped in cream paper. She stepped toward the sidewalk, and a van pulled up beside her. Too fast. The side door slid open. Before she could scream, gloved hands grabbed her. Flowers hit the pavement. Amina fought instantly. Kicking, scratching, thrashing with surprising force. Let go. A hand covered her mouth. Another yanked her inside. The van door slammed shut. Darkness. Panic. Her heartbeat exploded. No. No, no, no. This was happening. Actually happening. A kidnapping. The van sped off. Amina struggled wildly, managing to bite one attacker hard enough to draw blood. He cursed viciously. Hold her. But before they could restrain her fully, a violent crash shook the vehicle. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The van swerved sharply. Amina was thrown sideways. Another impact. Then shouting. Gunfire. Real gunfire. Her blood ran cold. The rear doors burst open. Daylight flooded in. And standing there like a nightmare wrapped in tailored black was Kong Min-jae. Expression murderous. Eyes lethal. Gun in hand. A bodyguard team behind him. For half a second, everyone froze. Even the kidnappers. Min-jae fired once. A warning shot into the ceiling panel. Touch her again, he said coldly, and I will personally make your death slow. The kidnappers panicked. One lunged. Big mistake. Min-jae moved with terrifying precision. Fast. Brutal. Efficient. A fight broke out inside and around the damaged van. Amina watched in shock. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't exaggerated mafia mythology. This was real. Kong Min-jae was genuinely dangerous. Not performative dangerous. Not rich man dangerous. Predator dangerous. Within minutes, the attackers were neutralized. Groaning. Bleeding. Or unconscious. Silence followed. Amina sat trembling, still half trapped against the van wall. Min-jae stepped inside, lowered his weapon, and crouched in front of her. His voice softened in a way she had never heard before. Are you hurt? The question nearly broke her. Not because of the words, but because of the way he asked them. As if her answer mattered. As if he had been genuinely afraid. Amina shook her head shakily. I don't think so. Min-jae exhaled. A tiny release of tension. Almost invisible. But there. Then, without warning, he pulled her into his arms. Amina froze. Completely. His embrace was firm. Protective. Instinctive. Not romantic. Not yet. Something raw. Relief. He held her as though reassuring himself she was still alive. Amina's hands slowly gripped the back of his coat. Her breathing uneven. Outside, bodyguards respectfully looked away. Because even they knew. Something had changed. Something irreversible. After a few seconds, Min-jae released her. But his jaw was tight. Eyes darker than usual. From now on, you don't leave alone. Amina blinked. What? You'll have security. That's unnecessary. He looked at her as though she'd suggested skydiving without a parachute. You were just kidnapped. Fair point. But still, I can't have bodyguards following me everywhere. You can. His tone made it sound less like discussion and more like law. Amina stared. You can't control my life. A bold statement. Especially under current circumstances. One bodyguard visibly looked nervous on her behalf. But Min-jae surprised everyone. He leaned closer slightly. Voice lower. Then stop making me worry. Silence. Absolute silence. Even traffic noise seemed to disappear. Amina's brain short-circuited. Did he just? No. Surely not. But his expression was serious. Too serious. And suddenly everything between them felt dangerously close to crossing a line. A line neither of them could uncross. Back at the penthouse, word of the kidnapping spread quickly. Madame Kong was furious. Security doubled. Protocols changed. Staff whispered endlessly. Han So-ra, however, reacted differently. She was not concerned. She was enraged. Not because Amina was kidnapped, but because Min Jae had personally gone after her. Personally. That meant the situation was worse than she thought. Much worse. She entered Min Jae's office later that night without knocking. He barely looked up. We need to talk. He continued reading documents. Then talk. Her composure cracked. Why are you risking everything for a maid? Min Jae finally looked at her. A dangerous mistake on her part. Because his eyes held zero warmth. What exactly am I risking? You know what I mean. She stepped closer. This is embarrassing. People are noticing. He leaned back slightly. Cold. Detached. And Han So-ra stared. For perhaps the first time, she understood something horrifying. She was losing him. Not gradually. Not hypothetically. Actually losing him. To someone she considered beneath her. Her voice dropped. Do you have feelings for her? A bold question. One that changed the room. Min Jae said nothing. That silence was louder than any answer. So-ra went pale. Then laughed bitterly. You've lost your mind. Min Jae returned to his paperwork. Conversation over. Humiliation washed through her like acid. And in that moment, something dark settled permanently inside her. Fine. If Min Jae wanted to choose Amina over her, then neither of them would have peace. Because Han So-ra was done competing. She was ready to destroy. That same night, she made a private phone call. Her tone calm. Controlled. Chilling. It's time. A voice answered on the other end. Are you sure? Yes. A pause. Then, prepare the poison. Meanwhile, unaware of the conversation that would alter everything, Amina sat alone in her staff quarters replaying the kidnapping. In one specific moment, Min Jae's voice. Stop making me worry. Her cheeks warmed. Ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. This was a disaster waiting to happen. She knew it. Yet her heart, unfortunately, was not a strategic thinker. There was a knock. Amina opened the door. Min Jae stood there. At her room. At night. Alone. Which was already scandalous enough to destroy several people socially. Her eyes widened. Sir. He looked strangely tense. As if he had come without fully planning what to say. Then he held out a small velvet box. Amina frowned. What is that? Open it. She hesitated, then obeyed. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet. Elegant. Minimal. Beautiful. And definitely far too expensive. Amina nearly dropped it. I can't accept this. You can. No. Yes. She stared at him. This man argued like a wall. Why are you giving me jewelry? His gaze lowered briefly to the bracelet. Then back to her. For protection. Confusion flashed across her face. He sighed faintly. It has a tracker. Amina blinked. Then stared at him in disbelief. A tracker. Of course. Why had she briefly imagined something romantic? Embarrassing. Yet oddly thoughtful. Min Jae noticed her expression. What? Nothing. A lie again. He almost smirked. Almost. Wear it. Then he turned to leave. But paused. Without looking back, he said quietly. You scared me today. And then he walked away. Leaving Amina completely frozen in her doorway. Heart racing so violently she thought it might expose her feelings before she did. But what she didn't know was that far worse things were already in motion. Because downstairs, in a locked cabinet inside Han So-ra's suite, a small clear vial now sat hidden behind luxury perfumes. Colorless, odorless, deadly, and soon, it would be poured into Kong Min Jae's drink. From that night onward, everything changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the quiet ways that matter most. In stolen glances, in prolonged silences, in moments that felt too intimate to be innocent and too restrained to be called love. Amina began wearing the bracelet. Not because Min Jae told her to. At least that's what she told herself. But every time she looked at the delicate gold chain around her wrist, she remembered the way he had stood outside her room. Slightly awkward. Uncharacteristically hesitant. Almost human. And that memory was dangerous. Because it softened him, made him harder to fear, harder to resist. Meanwhile, Kang Min-jae was losing a battle no enemy had ever forced him into. Emotional vulnerability. He hated it, despised it. He had spent years building walls high enough to survive betrayal, power struggles, assassination attempts, corporate wars, and family manipulation. Then one Maid with honest eyes and a stubborn moral compass had quietly begun dismantling everything, without even trying. That made her infinitely more dangerous, and infinitely harder to stay away from. One rainy evening, Amina was organizing books in Madame Kang's reading lounge when Min-jae entered. His tie was loosened, his shoulders visibly tense. He looked exhausted, more than usual. Madame Kang glanced between them knowingly. Then, in what was clearly an intentional act of manipulation disguised as elder wisdom, she stood up. "Oh dear," she said dramatically. "I suddenly remembered I have a call to make." Amina blinked. That was suspiciously convenient. Before she could protest, Madame Kang disappeared, leaving them alone. Again, Min-jae exhaled slowly. "Sit." Amina looked at him. "That's becoming a habit." A pause. Then, unexpectedly, "Are you complaining?" Amina nearly smiled. Not yet. That tiny exchange carried far too much warmth. She sat across from him. Rain tapped softly against the windows. A fireplace glowed nearby. Everything felt too cinematic to be safe. Min-jae loosened his cufflinks slightly. For a while, neither spoke. Then Amina noticed something. His hand. A slight tremor. Subtle. But there. "You're injured." He looked down. Dismissive. "It's nothing." A classic rich, emotionally unavailable man response. Amina frowned. That usually means it's something. His gaze lifted. There it was again. That near invisible softening he reserved only for her now. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded handkerchief with faint blood staining one corner. Amina's eyes widened. "You're bleeding." "It's superficial." "That's still bleeding." Before logic could intervene, she moved closer, took the handkerchief, inspected the wound near his ribs. A knife cut. Not deep, but recent. Amina looked up sharply. "You were stabbed." "Technically sliced." She stared. He was insufferable, and absurdly calm about bodily harm. Amina stood. "Sit properly." His brow lifted. "Are you giving me orders?" "Yes." A dangerous answer. Yet somehow, it amused him. Barely. He leaned back while Amina cleaned and re-bandaged the wound. Her fingers were gentle, careful, close enough to make his pulse slightly uneven. Not from pain. From proximity. Neither acknowledged it. But the air thickened anyway. "You should rest more," she murmured. Min-jae watched her quietly. "You sound concerned." She froze slightly. "Oh, a trap. Not intentional maybe, but still dangerous." "I'm practical," she replied. "If you collapse, everyone here becomes stressed." A weak save. Min-jae almost smiled. Almost. But then his expression shifted. Serious again. "Amina." Her hands paused. "Yes." He looked at her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "If something happens to me." She frowned instantly. "Don't say things like that." His gaze remained fixed. "Listen." "No." Her voice was firmer now, surprising even herself. "You don't get to say ominous things and act like that's normal." A brief silence. Then something astonishing happened. He actually smiled. A real one this time. Small. Rare. Beautiful enough to feel illegal. Amina stared, caught completely off guard. And in that moment, something inside both of them crossed a line. Not physically. Emotionally. Irrevocably. But what she didn't know was that upstairs, Hanso Ra watched security footage from a private tablet. And saw everything. The wound care. The closeness. The smile. Her expression became frighteningly still. That was the final straw. No more waiting. No more uncertainty. No more competition. Tonight. It would happen tonight. Later that evening, the Kang family hosted a private engagement dinner. Selective guests only. Executives. Political allies. A few high-level associates. A polished event hiding rotten foundations. Amina helped coordinate service from the background. She wore a simple black uniform dress, hair neatly tied back. Invisible. Or so she tried to be. But invisibility had become impossible. Not when Min-jae's eyes kept unconsciously finding her across crowded rooms. Not when So-Ra noticed every single glance. Dinner progressed smoothly. Champagne flowed. Crystal clinked. Conversations layered over classical music. A perfect wealthy facade. Then came dessert. And with it, the drink. Han So-ra personally approached Min Jae carrying a glass of red wine. A symbolic gesture. Fiancée serving her future husband. Elegant. Traditional. Poisonous. She smiled beautifully. For you. Min Jae accepted it absent-mindedly while reviewing something on his phone. Amina, standing several feet away with serving staff, noticed nothing unusual. Why would she? The wine looked ordinary. Everything looked ordinary. That was the brilliance of it. Min Jae finally lifted the glass. Drank. 1 sip. 2. Conversation continued. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. At first, the symptoms were subtle. A slight tightening of his jaw. A hand pressing briefly against his abdomen. Amina noticed. Her brows knit. Something was wrong. Then suddenly. Crash. Min Jae's wine glass shattered against the marble floor. Gasps erupted. He gripped the table hard. Breathing uneven. His face draining of color. Madame Kong stood abruptly. Min Jae. Chaos exploded. Guests panicked. Security rushed forward. Min Jae staggered slightly, hand bracing himself against the table. Sweat formed instantly along his forehead. Amina's heart stopped. No. Something was very wrong. He looked disoriented, almost unable to focus. Then collapsed. The room erupted. Amina instinctively moved forward before security blocked her. Doctors were called. Guests evacuated. Panic spread through the penthouse like wildfire. But in the middle of the chaos, Han So-ra remained disturbingly composed. Watching. Waiting. Her timing had been perfect. Min Jae was rushed upstairs to his bedroom under emergency care. Doctors initially suspected acute poisoning. But before a full hospital transfer could happen, Han So-ra intervened aggressively, claiming privacy, family authority, legal discretion. It bought her time. Time she needed. Exactly as planned. Hours later, the penthouse had fallen into eerie silence. Most staff were dismissed. Amina should have gone to her quarters. But anxiety gnawed at her. Something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. She couldn't explain it. Couldn't rationalize it. So against better judgment, she quietly approached Min Jae's private floor. The hallway was dim. Too quiet. One guard absent from his usual station. Odd. Very odd. Amina moved closer. Then froze. The bedroom door was slightly open. Inside, voices. She stepped silently toward the gap. And what she saw made her blood turn cold. Min Jae lay weak on the bed. Barely conscious. Sweating heavily. Breathing shallow. His skin pale as paper. He was alive. But barely. Standing over him was Han So-ra. Holding documents. A pen. And smiling. Sign it, Min Jae. Her voice was gentle. Terrifyingly gentle. Amina's stomach dropped. The will. This was no accident. This was murder. Calculated. Premeditated. Han So-ra leaned closer. You don't have much time left. Min Jae's fingers trembled weakly. He could barely move. Barely think. Poison had ravaged his system. Yet he still glared at her with hatred. Pure hatred. You? His voice was fractured. She smiled. Yes. No denial. No remorse. Nothing. Just honesty wrapped in cruelty. Amina covered her mouth to stop herself from gasping. Her entire body shook. This was real. Not suspicion. Not paranoia. Reality. The fiancé had poisoned him, and was now forcing him to sign over everything. Amina's mind raced. Call security? What if security was compromised? Run for help. Too slow. Do nothing? Impossible. Inside, So-ra grabbed Min Jae's hand. Forced the pen between his fingers. Be a good man for once. Tears of rage burned behind Amina's eyes. No. No, no, no. Not like this. Not after everything. Not him. Not like this. Her pulse thundered. Fear screamed at her to run. To protect herself. To stay uninvolved. But another force pushed harder. Something fiercer. Loyalty. Affection. Love, perhaps. Though she wasn't ready to name it yet. And in that split second, Amina made the most dangerous decision of her life. She pushed the bedroom door open. Hard. The sound cracked through the room. Han So-ra spun around. Eyes widening. For the first time that night. She looked startled. Amina? Min Jae's blurred vision shifted weakly toward the doorway. Their eyes met. Even half-conscious, recognition flickered. Relief. Tiny. But unmistakable. Amina stepped inside, heart pounding like war drums. Her voice shook, but only slightly. Move away from him. Han Soare stared in disbelief. Then laughed. Actually laughed. You? She looked almost insulted. A maid thinks she can stop me? Amina's hands clenched. Her body trembled violently. Not from weakness. From adrenaline. From terror. From knowing she had just walked directly into a lion's den. But there was no turning back now. Not anymore. Because this decision would either save Kong Min-jae or destroy her completely. For a moment, no one moved. Not Han Soare. Not Amina. Not even Kong Min-jae, whose breathing had become dangerously shallow. The room felt suspended outside time. Like the entire world was waiting to see which woman would move first. Han Soare recovered quickly. Of course she did. Women like her didn't crumble under pressure. They adapted. Her expression shifted from shock to icy amusement. Well, she said smoothly, placing the pen down on the bedside table. This is awkward. Amina stepped further into the room. Every instinct screamed that this was reckless, stupid, potentially fatal. But fear had already become irrelevant. She was past fear now. What did you do to him? Amina asked. Her voice shook slightly. Not enough to matter. Han Soare tilted her head. Be careful with your tone. Amina didn't blink. What did you do? The room went silent again. Then Soare smiled. A slow, chilling smile. You're smarter than you look. She folded her arms. Yes, I poisoned him. The words landed like a knife. Even hearing it said aloud made Amina feel sick. No hesitation. No guilt. Just arrogance. As if murder were merely another strategic business move. Min-jae tried to lift himself slightly. Failed. His breathing became rougher. Amina moved instinctively toward him. So Ra's voice sharpened. Stop. Amina ignored her. Big mistake. Soare grabbed a decorative crystal sculpture from the nearby table. Held it like a weapon. Take one more step. Amina froze. Her pulse pounded violently. This had escalated far beyond anything she was prepared for. Yet strangely, her mind became clearer, sharpened by crisis. She glanced around quickly. Bedroom. Nightstand. Medicine tray. Water. Documents. Phone. Exit. Variables. Possibilities. Han Soare laughed softly. Did you really think you could walk in here and play hero? Her eyes glittered coldly. You should have stayed downstairs where servants belong. Normally, those words might have hurt. Tonight, they barely registered. Because Min-jae was dying. That was all that mattered. Amina's gaze flickered briefly to the nightstand. Min-jae noticed. Barely, but enough. A microscopic shift of his eyes. Toward his phone. Not random. Intentional. A signal. Amina understood instantly. Good. He was still thinking. Still fighting. That meant there was hope. Han Soare noticed the eye movement too late. Amina moved first. Fast. She lunged sideways, grabbing the glass water pitcher from the nightstand and throwing it directly at Soare. Crash. Water exploded everywhere. Glass shattered. Soare screamed, stumbling backward. The crystal sculpture dropped from her hand. Amina immediately snatched Min-jae's phone. Han Soare lunged. Too slow. Amina ran. Not away. Toward the bathroom. She slammed the door shut and locked it just as Soare hit it violently from outside. Bang. Amina, open this door. Another bang. Harder. Amina's hands shook violently as she unlocked Min-jae's phone. Face recognition failed. Of course. She turned the phone toward Min-jae through the crack near the door opening. His face barely registered. Unlocked. Thank God. Amina searched frantically. Contacts. Messages. Security. There. A pinned emergency contact. Kwon Ji-sung. Likely bodyguard. She pressed call. Outside, Soare continued slamming against the bathroom door. You stupid girl. Amina pressed the phone harder to her ear. Pick up. Pick up. Pick up. Then, a voice. Chairman. Amina nearly cried from relief. It's Amina. Pause. Then immediate alertness. Miss Amina? Min-jae has been poisoned. Han Soare did it. Come now. Silence. Then, we're on our way. Call ended. Outside, the doorframe began cracking slightly under repeated force. Not good. Very not good. Amina turned to Min-jae. He was fading. Fast. She opened the bathroom door before Soare could break it completely and ran back to the bed. Han Soare grabbed her arm. Hard. You little. Amina shoved her with surprising force. Adrenaline is a marvelous thing. Soare stumbled into a side table. Amina reached Min Jae. She leaned close. Stay awake. His eyes were half-lidded, breathing ragged. She gripped his hand tightly. You do not get to die tonight. A dangerous amount of emotion slipped into her voice. Enough that even in his condition, something flickered in his expression. Something warm, faint, but present. Outside the bedroom, rapid footsteps approached. Multiple. Heavy. Then the bedroom doors burst open. Kwon Ji-sung entered first. Tall. Sharp. Gun drawn. Several loyal security men behind him. His expression darkened instantly as he took in the scene. Min Jae dying. Amina at his bedside. Han So-ra drenched, disheveled, furious. Everything became clear. Han So-ra's face finally lost composure. You can't prove anything. A bold claim. Unfortunately for her. Amina lifted Min Jae's phone. Actually, she held it up. I recorded your confession. Silence. Absolute silence. So-ra stared. Her face drained of color. During the confrontation, when she admitted poisoning him, the phone microphone had been recording the entire time. Not a heroic genius master plan. Just instinct. Pure survival instinct. And it had worked. Han So-ra whispered. No. Kwon Ji-sung took the phone. Listened. His expression became murderous. He turned sharply. Detain her. Security advanced. Han So-ra backed away. You can't touch me. But power is fragile. Especially borrowed power. And hers had just evaporated. She screamed as security restrained her. Elegant mask shattered completely. Hair disheveled. Voice shrill. Image destroyed. The mighty fiancée reduced to desperation. As she was dragged away, she glared at Amina with pure venom. This is your fault. Amina ignored her. Because finally, people who actually mattered were arriving. Real doctors. Trusted ones. Apparently Ji-sung had anticipated betrayal possibilities long ago and kept external medical contingency teams. Useful paranoia. Doctors rushed Min Jae into emergency stabilization. Antidote administration. Monitoring. Intervention. Critical. Touch and go. Hours passed. The longest hours of Amina's life. She sat outside Min Jae's private medical suite, still wearing damp clothes from shattered glass water. Hands trembling. Mind exhausted. Madame Kong sat beside her eventually. Silent. Observant. Then softly. You saved him. Amina looked down. I almost didn't. But you did. A pause. Then Madame Kong smiled faintly. And you saved the company. That too. The ensigned will remain invalid. The assets safe. The fortune protected. Han So-ra's entire scheme collapsed. Not just murder. Financial theft too. All destroyed by the one person she had underestimated most. The maid. But what happens next changes everything. 48 hours later, Kong Min Jae finally woke up. Weak. Exhausted. Alive. Amina had not left the hospital-level suite once. Despite repeated instructions to rest. Typical. She sat asleep in a chair beside his bed, head tilted awkwardly. Still there. Min Jae watched her quietly. Something inside him shifted deeply. Dangerously. Profoundly. This woman had risked everything. Career. Freedom. Possibly her life. For him. Not for money. Not for status. Not for manipulation. For him. That realization hit harder than poison. His voice was rough. Amina. Her eyes flew open instantly. She stood too fast. You're awake. Relief flooded her face, so openly it almost hurt to witness. How do you feel? Min Jae studied her. Then asked the only question that mattered. Why? Amina blinked. What? Why did you come back? His gaze remained steady. You could have walked away. Fair question. A rational person probably would have. Amina looked down briefly, then back at him, and answered honestly. Because at this point, there was no point pretending anymore. Because I couldn't lose you. Silence. The kind of silence that alters lives. Min Jae stared at her. Not as employer. Not as superior. Not as someone emotionally unavailable hiding behind power. Just as a man hearing the words he had secretly wanted. Needed. Feared. His voice softened. You almost got yourself killed. Amina exhaled shakily. Yes. That was reckless. Yes. Very reckless. She gave the faintest smile. I'm noticing a theme. And then, finally, Min Jae reached for her hand. Not accidentally. Not under pretense. Deliberately. Held it firmly. Warmly. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. This time with intention. Amina. Her heart thundered. Yes, for a man known for intimidation, violence, and ruthless control. His next words were surprisingly vulnerable. I don't know how to do this. She frowned softly. Do what? His gaze held hers. This. Everything unsaid filled the room. Emotion, fear, attachment, need, love, messy, inconvenient, terrifying love. Amina smiled faintly. Neither do I. That seemed to comfort him. A rare miracle. Then, because life apparently loved dramatic timing, Madame Kong walked in, saw their joined hands, and smiled like a woman whose shipping agenda had finally succeeded. About time. Both immediately looked mildly embarrassed, which only amused her more. Weeks later, the aftermath settled. Han So-ra was formally charged. Poisoning, fraud conspiracy, attempted coercion, multiple financial crimes uncovered in the investigation. Her social empire collapsed overnight. The media devoured her downfall. A spectacular ruin. Rival Mafia boss Jang Dae-hyun also made one fatal miscalculation. He assumed Min Jae's recovery would leave him weakened. Instead, it made him furious. Coldly, methodically furious. And Kang Min Jae was far more dangerous when personally motivated. Within 1 month, Dae-hyun's network was dismantled. Assets frozen. Operations raided. Political protection stripped. A surgical destruction. Revenge, beautifully executed. As for Amina, her life transformed quietly. Not through grand Cinderella fantasy. Not overnight. But undeniably. She was no longer staff. No longer invisible. No longer merely surviving. Min Jae offered to fund her education. She initially refused. He insisted. She negotiated partial acceptance. Compromise. Progress. And one evening, months later, under Seoul skyline lights on the penthouse terrace where everything once began, Min Jae handed her a small box. Amina sighed suspiciously. Another tracker? He almost smiled. No. She opened it. Inside was a ring. Elegant. Simple. Beautiful. Her breath caught. Not an extravagant diamond spectacle. Something far more personal. Intentional. Min Jae stepped closer. Still intimidating. Still emotionally awkward. Still very much himself. But softer now. Only with her. I don't make promises lightly. His voice was low. But if you stay. A pause. Rare vulnerability again. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Amina's eyes filled slightly. Dangerous emotional damage. She laughed softly through it. That sounded almost romantic. His expression remained serious. It was extremely romantic. That made her laugh harder. And finally, she nodded. Yes. Simple. Powerful. Enough. Min Jae exhaled almost imperceptibly. Relief. Victory. Love. All disguised beneath his usual composure. He slid the ring onto her finger, then gently touched her face, and kissed her, slowly, tenderly, like a man who had survived death and finally understood what was worth living for. Below them, Seoul glittered endlessly. A city of ambition, power, betrayal, and survival. But high above it, in the penthouse that had once nearly become a grave, a new story began. Not one built on status, or bloodline, or power, but on loyalty, trust, sacrifice, and a love neither of them had planned. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the richest, or the most feared, or the most powerful. Sometimes the strongest person is simply the one who stays when leaving would be easier. This story reminds us that love doesn't care about status. Healing begins where trust is finally earned. And sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is the one who changes everything. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from, and comment your favorite moment below, like this video, and subscribe to @Physial_Threads for more emotional Mafia love stories.